Drivers, start your engines!
Hit the pace car! What for? Because you hit every other damn thing out there, I want you to be perfect!
When I'm driving, I got a guy on the radio who talks to me. It's him, but he talks to me.
Well, I wanna be a race car driver, pretty girls eating from my hand, yeah. Wanna live a life of fun and danger, no sweaty working for the man, alright.
Good evening, race fans. Welcome to the Hoobazoo Radio Network and welcome to the Drafting the Circuits program. My name is Frank Santoroski. I'll be your host for the next hour as we talk about this past week in racing and preview next week. Joining me in the studio, Richard Youden and Louise Torres. Fellas, how we doing?
Good, thank you.
Going pretty good, except for the F1 life, but it's going pretty good.
Except for the F1 life, yeah, I got you. We'll get into that a little later in the show. But my gosh, we've got a lot to talk about tonight. After earlier this week, I was afraid we'd be shy topics, but there's been enough news this week to kind of really give us a full show. But let's start with the final race of the NASCAR regular season, where we have crowned a regular season champion, who is young Kyle Larson. And we have set the field for the playoffs. And those 16 drivers that may be making the playoffs are the aforementioned Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, who won at Daytona, making it 2 in a row. Also, Martin Truex Jr., Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, Alex Bowman, Denny Hamlin, William Byron, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, Kurt Busch, Christopher Bell, Michael McDowell, Eric Almirola, Tyler Reddick, and in the final spot, Kevin Harvick, who winless this year, which is odd. We're used to seeing Harvick contend week in and week out, but at the end of the day, he got enough of a job done to make it in the playoffs, and hopefully he'll be able to come alive here. Because we just really haven't heard much out of Harvick this year. It's been kind of, the Kyle and Ryan show are the two winningest drivers out there, along with Truex and Chase Elliott have had good seasons as well. But let's talk about Daytona. Louise, you had a chance to watch the race.
Yeah, certainly. It first of all, with this first race with this new plate package after all that hoopla with Logano flying over at Talladega and all, for the first 147 laps, it was looking pretty good. It seems like, okay, there's been some multiple car incidents, but people can't avoid them. Then it kind of went down to hell afterwards, where splitters became a problem again with the grass, where a multi-car accident that without the splitters, if it was like the Valens of back in the day, it would have been just a long yellow. But no, when you have splitters and Ryan Newman going through the grass to avoid the wreck, unfortunately it didn't destroy his car, they had to stop the race primarily because there was grass all over the backstretch, or as in Daytona, what it used to be called the super stretch back in the day. And then you have your typical multi-car accidents late in the race where it wipes out about a good chunk of the field. Another last lap turn 3 entry incident that wiped up essentially almost the whole field. But the race was already ultimately decided with Ryan Blaney getting back-to-back wins, his third of the year. We talked about, for much of Ryan Blaney's career, he only wins once a year. Now he's got 3 wins, and that thrusts him from being probably in the middle of the playoff seed to number 2 behind Kyle Larson.
And he's also got a ton of momentum going into the playoffs. I mean, nothing says you're good to go for the playoffs like finishing off the regular season with a couple of wins.
No, for sure. And there's this thing about Blaney, because there's been one or two times in his playoff run where he might have been a championship for dark horse. I think one year I felt like he was probably going to win it all. Not let me rephrase it, make it to the championship for, but that hasn't happened. But with the momentum he has, I would not count him out as a championship for contender. I think he's been knocking at that door. He just needed some spark to happen. The only thing is this is Todd Gordon's last season as crew chief. So who knows how he'll fare in 22, but he's stepping up to be probably the future of Team Penske, which It looks like it's going to be that way. We'll see how Austin Cindric fares, and we'll see how Joey Logano pairs up with compared to Blaney, because I think it's safe to say that Blaney's finally going to hit his stride like I felt like he can achieve, and maybe do something in my that Dale Jr. couldn't, and that is be a popular figure and win a championship. I mean, we already have one that won a championship, but there's people claiming it as a Mickey Mouse champion, like everyone from 2020, because of the pandemic and all that hoopla. But that's a different story for another time.
I was gonna say you're digging deep for conspiracy right now.
There's some people that like to claim that Elliott's championship in 2020 is Mickey Mouse, like LeBron James and the Lakers were as Mickey Mouse because of the whole pandemic and other reasons. But yeah, and that's just a weird conspiracy that I just like, okay, it is what it is, whatever. Think what you will, but if Elliott showed up at the end when it matters most. That's what you got to do late in the season, to show up when it matters most, and that's how you probably end up winning championships. Look at Jimmy Johnson for much of his career.
Yeah, you've got to know how to play that playoff game. Yeah,
Or look no further than Tony Stewart. We're talking about Kevin Harvick. He had a great showing at Daytona, just got wiped out by essentially Kurt Busch clipping Daniel Suarez. And that in the closing laps, Tyler Reddick, you could have ridden off Tyler Reddick multiple times, because when Reddick got involved in the big one with the red flag, you thought his day was done, oil everywhere. Austin Dillon's going to make it. And then going into overtime, Austin Dillon was like, 3 to 5 points behind Reddick. All he needed to do is probably finish in the top 3, ideally win, or Reddick to fall back a few more spots, and he'd be in it. But you had Corey LaJoie, Chris Buescher, Daniel Suarez, Bubba Wallace. You had so many at the very end that wanted that final playoff spot for where they had to win, period. Ryan Preece, Ricky Stenhouse as well. But in the end, it was Ryan Blaney that got tremendous help by Corey LaJoie to get the job done. Imagine if LaJoie were to somehow win that thing, one race removed after sitting out because of COVID protocols, and goes in to win at Daytona and puts himself into the round of 16. Would have that been something?
That would be remarkable, yeah. But back to Blaney, and to your point of Blaney kind of coming into his own, I really feel that is the case. He spent the last couple of years kind of in the shadow of Brad and Joey. You know, he'd been the other Penske guy. You know, again, like you said, collecting a win here or there along the way, but I just see this guy continue to drive better and better and smarter and with a lot more confidence. I think he feels like, you know, he doesn't feel like that third wheel anymore. He feels like he's, you know, he could as easily be the number one driver as much as, you know, Brad or Joey, even though, you know, they say there's no actual number one driver, but, you know, particularly with, you know, Brad headed elsewhere, for the immediate future. I mean, what better of a time than, you know, Ryan to kind of step up, flex his muscle here. And perhaps, like you said, I think he's going to be one of the favorites for this championship. Now, Richard, you've been a little quiet over there. Yes. So let's talk about this thing with the splitters. This always seems to be an issue. And I guess the two things you could do is, one, get rid of all the grass and just pave all that, and paint it green, or you know, we could add clearance to the car, or just remove the splitter. I mean, what are your thoughts on the whole? It seems like they do more harm than good at times.
Well, for start, your front splitter is a massively important aerodynamic part of the car. They're basically your same as your front wing on an open wheel car. And they do generate a huge amount of downforce, so they're pretty critical to a performance of these vehicles. I mean, there was a third option there, frankly, he didn't mention, and that was to not drive through the grass in the first place. You know.
Well, yeah, that goes without saying. I don't think anybody intentionally says, "Hey, let me try to shortcut the tri-oval."
It's a wreck avoidance.
It just happens.
And also, that grass
course,
is integral with the road course for the Rolex 24 too.
But I mean, and they have it at every circuit, pretty much every tri-oval that I can think of has some sort of grass section at the front there. And I know what you're saying there, but at the end of the day, you don't. It's not like a deterrent, is it, or anything like that? Because if you get spun out, you get spun out. You're not going to be thinking about the consequences of it at that moment in time. But I don't see an issue with it. Yeah, it makes a bit of a mess of the car and it can damage it, yada yada yada. But NASCAR is one of those series that over the course of 30 odd races or whatever they're having, the 36 races or whatever you have in a season, that's not going to stop you from winning a championship. Whatever. Yeah, it may make a mess of a race, and it may bring out a red flag or a long caution in the race, whatever it may be. But I don't think it's particularly dangerous. And yeah, it makes a mess of the car and the like. But I don't have a huge issue with that on the track there.
Now the greenskeepers at the tracks disagree with you.
Yeah, but if you get rid of the grass, then you don't have any greenkeepers at the track.
There you go. Right? Yeah, those poor guys are out of work.
So they probably do agree with it to a certain extent. But you know what? They have enough money for that. So I'm not gonna. I just think that it can ruin a guy's race when he just, say he's avoiding a wreck and he has to go low on the grass, he could rip a splitter off, and it does potentially ruin a race for the guy. Yeah, I get that. But I mean, would it hurt to remove the grass and just put like an AstroTurf down or a spray painted sort of surface? It probably wouldn't. Or you could put like a high friction green surface like they have at Paul Ricard or something like that, which could potentially be safer. I mean, my biggest concern actually with the whole tri-oval makeup is the potential of uncontrolled cars going onto pit road coming through that area. We think back to, I'm thinking there's one incident, which was Brad Keselowski at Pocono, which I know is a slightly different situation because they're not a tri-oval, they don't have grass, but he did lose control of the car and end up going down pit road. But what happens if there'd been a pit stop in progress there or something? I think that, and it blows my mind even today that in the stage we're at with the safety levels, where we don't have a wall between the edge of pit road and that grass runoff area, because if you do spin out on it, you've got zero grip. You can't stop the car. You can't change direction. That's my biggest concern with that.
Particularly if it like has rained earlier in the day.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's like
go through great lengths to dry the track, but they don't dry that grass.
It's like a swamp.
No,
hold on to the moisture, and we've seen a number of guys just get in that wet grass, and then it's just it's totally out of your hands. You just have to wait.
Yeah,
you either get stuck or pull a beautiful slide like Ricky Rudd in the 03 Coke 600 one time, where you got nothing but water poured in, or even Kyle Busch in 2005, where his car was completely mudded because of the long rain delay, and also we had rain affect the Xfinity race where they had to finish it in the following day.
Yeah, I just think that they can tidy that up in terms of safety, but I don't think personally there's any issue with a few sods of turf being kicked up and a splitter being ripped off. I mean, it's part of it. You just got to put it down to whatever and move on. And as I say, over the course of a 36 race championship, losing one splitter because you get punted off into the grass, isn't going to cost you a championship, I don't think.
All right. Fair enough. So let's get back to the race. And it was Chris Buescher who crossed the finish line second. But he was disqualified post-race, lost his position. That handed second place to Bubba Wallace and the 23 XI team for their best finish of the year. I mean, here's a team that went into the year with a lot of high hopes, a lot of expectations, but between co-owners Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan, lots of good sponsorship money, assistance from Joe Gibbs. So this, finally, they've got a really, really good result here to be proud of. And then on the heels of also the news that they will be running a second car next year, and a certain Mr. Kurt Busch will be in that second car.
Yeah, for sure. For Bubba, I think it's the second top 5 of the year. The other one taking place at the second Pocono race. Yeah, the second Pocono race. But yeah, everybody been saying if there's one guy who was going to probably break through and make the playoffs was Bubba, and he was at the line 2 spots, but in results is 1 spot short behind his buddy Ryan Blaney. And so it was a superb run. Even when he at Daytona in the 500, he had a nice showing. So it doesn't surprise me he was going to do that well. But yeah, it seems like 2311 are looking to turn things around to where maybe they can outclassify Trackhouse's 99 team that also is going to 2 cars next season with Ross Chastain. So both Ganassi drivers will have a home with the 2 more talked about new teams based on the co-owner side of things. But Kurt going to 2311, I think it's a neat way to build upon, because we talk about how Alonso is with some of the teams, I'll eliminate the toxicity elements of it. But with Kurt Busch, with any team, look at Phoenix, look at Furniture Row, even with Penske for a little bit, he knows how to make teams look good and become better over time. The only one that he really didn't, per se, was Penske to some extent. But every other team he's been with, he has. The Ganassi are in much better position than they were when before Kurt arrived, because back then you had Larson and McMurray. Larson was still trying to hone his NASCAR craft, and McMurray was just there, floundering a bit with some flashes of brilliance. But with Kurt and Ross, they seem like they're finally clicking. And Kurt has had really good runs as of late. Since that Atlanta win, even before his win at Atlanta, Kurt was having some good runs. So if you want to keep an eye on a dark horse for the championship, maybe Kurt is your guy. I don't know how far he'll make it, but I wouldn't count him out to make a good threat of being a championship for contender. But Kurt going to the 45 next year with the blessings from Kyle Petty to use that number, because it's been since 2008. That 45 has been on the Cup level. I say it'll be a good keep an eye on. I think Kurt will do well with that team, and also could join a rare list of guys to win with at least four different manufacturers in their Cup careers. Because
this is true. Yeah, because he won in a Dodge.
Yeah, he wanted a Dodge, he wanted a Ford and a Chevy.
Yeah.
The real quick to wrap up with Daytona, couple of first-time top 10 finishers, and B.J. McLeod and Josh Bilicki. Bilicki finished 11th, but with Buescher's DQ, he ended up getting his first top 10, which is Rick Ware Racing's third ever top 10 in the Cup Series. Last year, they had two with David Reagan and Brennan Poole. This year, they finally got one through Bilicki. And how Bilicki ended up being Rick Ware Racing's only saving grace is the fact that he was ahead of the other three Rick Ware cars, which they all pile into each other, which kind of ultimately led to the typical Daytona calamity that we saw with the big one. The other big wreck that took out Kyle Busch and Cass Gralla. Gralla T-boned Kyle Busch. He suffered, if I remember, sustained ankle injuries, but he is medically clear to run. But he got hurt in that accident very late where he's just completely T-boned Kyle Busch big time. That's where Busch got the heavy damage from that whole ordeal. And who else just stood out? But yeah, those are the ones that stood out. Hendrick cars had good showing, but you still got to beat Ford and Team Penske. Albeit Logano and Keselowski once again imploded over other people's mess or their well doing. Well, Logano had a flat tire where he was bottoming out way too much. But in fairness, Penske was able to get the win. Kind of the telltale of the season that Fords are going to be strong in a match at Talladega. We're going to see the same. So you got to beat the Fords, period.
Yeah. The Fords have that those restrictor plate races, what they call them now.
The Super Speedways, essentially.
Super Speedway package, yeah, because it's not an actual restrictor plate anymore. But then again, Indianapolis still has Carburation Day, so we can call it what we want.
Yeah.
So we're off to Darlington, which is Oh, one of the more unique tracks on the schedule. One of the oldest ones. One of the this being the Labor Day weekend. This is one of the really a crown jewel event, the Southern 500 that was on Labor Day weekend forever until it had moved, and it was a few years ago reinstated to its proper place. Now it's the kickoff to the playoffs, and we've got, just looking at this thing, it's the guys that are on the bottom half of that 16 that really need to kick their game up and try to grab a win. For fear of being eliminated after the third race of the round.
Yeah, this one is easy to tell who's going to be in the bottom four, but as a matter of fact, I was mentioning it right now. I think my bottom four would be, albeit I said early in the year, the beginning of the season, one of my bold predictions was Kyle Larson was going to fall out of the first round. I just don't see it. Nobody really thought.
Not after the season he's had.
No, that would be a huge surprise. It'll still live a huge surprise if that happens. So this one is probably one of the more easier bottom fours you can name of. The fourth and final one is kind of a wild card, but I'll mention why in a bit. Bottom four: McDowell, Almirola, Reddick, and Joey Logano. I feel like there's going to be that surprise one guy that falls out of the first round. We tend to have that. I feel like Logano's going to be probably that guy. I just don't see him really getting his season turned around, to be honest.
All right. Well, I mean, that is kind of bold, because Logano usually runs pretty well in the playoffs. But you feel like a guy like Christopher Bell is pretty solid through the first couple of rounds? I
think Bell will make it by just fine. Same with Harvick, Hamlin, and Kurt Busch. I think they'll be just fine. The only one that I am more iffy, aside from Joey Logano, is probably Alex Bowman. Yes, he has 3 wins. And
he
also
struggled lately, doesn't he?
Yeah, and also you have I would consider Truex to keep an eye on, because if Darlington was not on this playoff run, I actually would have Truex out. He'd be the first 4 out. Because honestly, Truex has not had, when you really look at it, Truex has had good runs, but nothing that stands out at all since his Darlington win. Yeah, he had a couple top 3s like at Sonoma and a couple then and there, but he's not stand out since that win. So if you want to talk about somebody who needs to get it together and deliver big, this is the perfect time for Truex to showcase, look, I'm still capable of winning races. And what happened between Darlington till now is just a bump on the road.
Well, and we're going to Darlington, which maybe, obviously he's got a pretty good setup there.
Truex obliterated the whole entire competition in the Goodyear 400. The only way Truex was not going to win is if Kyle Larson didn't run out of laps or wear out his tires to where he ran out of laps, because Larson was catching him. And I feel like for this one, Larson's probably going to start off the championship run, quote unquote, with a win at Darlington, which will be, to my knowledge, he won the 600, so it'll be his second crown jewel win of the year and his career as well.
All right, so that's your prediction, Richard. Who do you like for Darlington?
Ooh, Darlington. You can't really look past Larson, can you really? Blaney's in good form. You could carry that momentum. Any of the, Kyle Busch is never going to be far away. But let's go. Let's go Larson.
All right, and I'm gonna go with Truex then, just for the reason we just stated, that he dominated up there in the earlier race, and here's a guy who also knows how to come alive in the playoffs. Here's a guy who knows how to win some championships. So that'll be this coming weekend. This past weekend we had Formula 1 in Spa in the rain. Is always fun to watch, but there was a bit more rain than we would have liked to have seen, and as it turned out, it's caused a lot of controversy because we only had literally 1 formation lap and 2 laps under a safety car. We had to start from the pit lane. We pulled on in and we called it a race, and we awarded half points and let the guys celebrate on a podium and sent the fans home. Now the backlash of that is, been a number of different things. One, first and foremost, that, wasn't even safe to send the drivers out there in the first place, as wet as it was. Was the reason they sent the drivers out was that there was no intent to ever go green. They just wanted to get enough laps in to call an official race, so we would have protection from people wanting ticket refunds, where some of the other stories float around? Or was there a legitimate break in the rain that they were hoping to race under safety car until the weather let up? I don't know. Richard, what are your thoughts?
So to answer your first question, I don't think that they were trying to do this to avoid having to compensate the fans. I think the reason they did this was, per your second point, they wanted to make it an official race. I don't think there's anything more than that. That they had an opportunity. There was no other window available to them to try and complete the race. So they had the only opportunity that they had was to run it on a limited schedule or a limited number of laps, get it as a classified race, and everybody take home half points and thanks for coming, move on. Now, that's not to say by any stretch of the imagination that they won't do something to compensate the fans that did turn up and watch the race. You buy a ticket to watch a Formula One race, and they didn't. And I think under this new regime, if you like, with the Liberty Media running the sport and the FIA being a lot more open and sort of interactive with the fans, I firmly believe that they will do something to compensate the fans, whether that'll be a reduction in tickets for next year or something along those lines. I think you'll see something like that. But I certainly don't think this was an attempt to sort of force their hand to avoid paying compensation, because I firmly believe that if they had wanted to sort of, if they did have to pay compensation, they would have done quite happily.
Yeah, that probably was one of the farthest things from their mind when they were trying to make that decision. They were just trying to get,
without a doubt,
trying to get a race in. But let's talk about the awarding of the points, because there are some folks who feel that, hey, no race, no green flag laps, there should be no points, and at the end of the day, so you've got Verstappen going to pick up 12 and a half points for following a safety car around. And so what if he wins this championship by, less than that 12 and a half points? You know what I mean?
Hamilton and Verstappen both have the half point, along with Carlos Sainz.
Right, okay.
Not factor.
Yeah, I don't think the half point sort of justification, indicated there is so much of an issue. I think what you can easily put the sort of circumstance on the other foot there and say, well, what would have happened if they had raced and Hamilton had crashed out and Verstappen won? Then Verstappen would have gained 25 points on Hamilton. There's always this lottery, isn't there? Hamilton could have gone out and raced, and and Verstappen crashed out and Hamilton could have increased his lead. So
they could have both crashed out and Russell could have won.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was what's rough from us. Well, yeah, he got a podium in a Williams after qualifying second in a Williams, but we kind of robbed us from seeing what Russell could do in the wets. That's one of the bigger travesties.
Yeah, to a certain extent, you're very right. But you can only do what you can do with what's been put out in front of you. He didn't have a choice to change what he did. People are criticizing, it's a hollow podium. It's not. I don't have any. That lap he did in qualifying was phenomenal and deserved every ounce of every point of every trophy that he got from that.
Yeah, it kind of rewards him back from Sakir, where the bad pit stop where Mercedes cost him a win or a podium. So it kind of makes up for it in some ways. And also, both Williams cars have scored points in back-to-back races, which is the only team that can claim that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've done incredibly well. So, yeah, I certainly don't think that there's any sort of negativity about it or anything apart from complete, from my perspective anyway, complete respect for what they did and justification for scoring those points. Yeah, you could argue that, if it had gone the full distance, then maybe he wouldn't have finished on the podium. And you know what? Chances are he wouldn't, but you can't make that differentiation. You cannot.
Yeah, you'll never know. The world will never know.
No.
But let me
So,
ask you this though. Okay, is it just that the Formula One travel schedule is too tight that we couldn't have a Monday morning race, or weather just projected to be that bad all the way through the rest of the week? Because we see NASCAR and IndyCar race on Monday and sometimes Tuesday all the time.
Oh yeah. I think where the issue comes with this is there's no precedent for it in terms of running it for a delay. And what that can induce is a large number of unknown variables. Now, I'm not saying this is the case, but if you look back to a similar race that was covering controversy, the Indy Grand Prix back in the early 2000s when only 6 cars competed. Now, one of the possible solutions pre-race there was to put a tire chicane on that, what is turn 1 at Indy, on the final corner there, and prevented the cars from traveling at such high speed through that corner. And everybody would have thought, well, yeah, why don't you do that? It's a stupid idea not to do that. It would make perfect sense to do that. However, there's a lot of legal ramifications there. That wasn't a designated part of the track. What happens if somebody had an accident in those circumstances, and all of the other alternatives? Now, and so again, you go to a Monday race. Well, would you have had the full number of allocated marshals be available? Because the marshals are volunteers, they're working people. They may not have been able to take time off work to turn up and do that. Medical supervision, that's the big issue. So if somebody had a wreck and the medical supervision wasn't available, then what would the reaction to that have been? And how, would there have been any legal ramifications from that? So I think that's one of the issues that they were facing. And they couldn't guarantee the safety of the race, which is their ultimate priority.
Yeah, because I don't recall a Formula One race ever being run on a Monday.
No.
I can't.
No, I don't.
I can't think of one ever. So
it hadn't happened. And the only time they moved the races through like safety reasons, like at Spa in the early '80s, they moved it much later, or they just ran it earlier the following season than normal.
It was 84, I think, when the track actually broke up. They'd resurfaced it and done a botched job on it. And as they were running on the Saturday, literally lumps of track were coming out of the ground. So they deemed they couldn't race it, and they actually went back there later in the year. I can't think.
Which brings up the topic of there's an empty spot in the calendar where the Japanese Grand Prix was. Although I do understand.
Yeah, that's a lot of flying around there, isn't it?
Well, at that time of year, also you
could still be
weather in Spa. Yeah,
you could easily have snow in Spa.
Exactly.
That time
of year. That wouldn't be the first time. So yeah, the FIA were put in a very difficult position and a very unprecedented position. Now, I think a number of things that they will take from this and a number of options they will address is looking at, weather forecasts, for example. So, okay, I don't know what the weather, I mean, they had support races in the morning, so the weather wasn't that bad in the morning. They could have quite easily said, rather than a 2 o'clock local start for the race, make it an 11 o'clock local start, because there's no Sunday morning warm up or anything like that. They could have easily moved the support races, move those out, because at the end of the day, people don't go to these races to watch, the W Series or Formula 3 or Formula 2, and that's no disrespect to those, but that's not what you go for. You go for the Formula 1, the main event, and you could have quite easily, I think, said, okay, we're going to start at 11. And you know what? Let's just give it a go. And I know that they've done that in NASCAR before. They do that in golf and all these other sports. If there's a thunderstorm coming through on a Sunday afternoon, then the PGA Tour will start the final round 3 or 4 hours earlier just to get it in. So I think we'll see a little bit of flexibility come out on that. Now, obviously, Formula One is a very rigid sport, probably the most structured sport when it comes to timing and events and legalities, and so it can't be an opinion sort of based scenario. It will have to be a factual based scenario. So, weather forecast would have to be very accurate and very, very well determined and agreed upon by all teams to move that race start. But I think that's something they will definitely have to look at to prevent this from happening. But again, you've got to look at it to the same extent. In 71 years of Formula One, this is the only time it's ever happened. Now, that's not to say it's the worst weather they've ever been in. I'm sure there was plenty of times in the previous 71 years that they did actually race in weather far worse than this. But obviously we have different.
Japan 76 comes to mind. Australia 91.
Yeah, I mean, there's Adelaide in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Even though they did stop that race. And Monaco in 84 when they stopped that race as well.
Right.
But, there are these circumstances where, there is precedent for something like this sort of bad weather. So it's like, okay, guys, let's be a little bit proactive about this and preempt these circumstances and see what we can come up with. And as I say, I think that'll be the big change, is that potentially having an earlier start for the race. Last year we had a 2-day weekend races. So they are being more and more flexible with these things. But again, the teams need time, because all these races are about pure execution of plans and processes and procedures. So if you turn around and say, right, okay, guys, you got to start at 11 a.m. The race starts at 11 a.m. They're like, okay, well, we normally get to the track at 7 a.m. on race morning. We're now going to get to the track at 4 a.m. on race morning. So there's a lot of variables going on there, and a lot of things that have got to be put into place and teams agreeing upon. But I think you will.
That's not the kind of call you can make at the last minute.
No, there has to
you
be
can't say, guys, we're going to start in an hour.
The weather forecast looks bad. Let's look at this and have this opportunity in place for the weekend. And you know what? We're going to make this call post qualifying, and to a certain extent it gives you a bit of flexibility. You'd be more likely to say, okay, we're going to bring this forward 2 or 3 hours, just in case, than leave it to the last minute and go, oh yeah, we can't race, guys, sorry.
I think the other problem is like the television networks and all of that stuff too.
There is that, but Formula One's a pretty big draw these days, and I think enough people now have access to like streaming services and on demand, and like the Amazon Fire Sticks and the Google TVs and Apple TV products, that you can stream these races these days live. And I know they have done that in other series, and as I say, a lot of Formula One races now globally are shown on dedicated sports channels, which can adapt pretty quickly.
Yeah, one could hope. I'm not sure how ESPN. How ESPN can be sometimes with some of their stuff.
Well, they'd just stick it on ESPNU or something, wouldn't they? Or ESPN. Oh, yeah. I mean, the race was actually on ESPN2 this last weekend, wasn't it?
Yeah, but they could also put on ESPN News. But yeah. They also, if they're doing an early start, they could still start the broadcast at the time they had it scheduled. It would just be on a little bit of a tape delay.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's not like if they're starting it later where it's going to go into something. They could still use the time they had allotted for Formula One if that was the last resort.
Yeah, I think there's ways around it. But again, that's something that Liberty needs to sit down and discuss with the TV rights holders and everything like that, and really create this clear plan, because Formula One needs plans. It's not one of those. Formula One's not one of those sports these days where you get the team managers around the water cooler and go, "Hey boys, we're going to do this. Okay, cool, right? Yeah, we're doing it." That's not how Formula One works anymore. It's government by diplomacy sort of thing, and it can get a little bit silly at times.
Yeah. All right, so let's move away from the topic of what to do in case of rain. And let's talk about some of the driver movement news that we've there's been some announcements we were hoping to hear over the winter break that didn't come forth, but now it appears that we will have some announcements soon. And the first one that's kind of official is Kimi Räikkönen has announced that he will retire yet again at the end of the
again
2021 season. Yeah.
But did he ever retire last time, or did he just walk up? Did he just?
He basically
stop
walked
racing?
away. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Well,
think he
it-
retired.
Go to
officially.
rally and NASCAR for a cup of coffee.
Yeah, he just did
yeah.
what he wanted to do. But no, I mean, I think this is something we all saw coming. I mean, as much as we love Kimi out there, and he's still as fast as anybody. You know, there's no drop in his speed. I just think it's for Kimi, knowing the way he is, it's probably just a boredom thing more than a, you know. And you do need that sort of evolution within the sport of new drivers coming in and you know, drivers moving on from one team to another and that natural progression. And I think this is the start of the sort of domino effect, if you like, and the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle falling into place. So it's, you know, of course, everybody, the big talking point for everybody is George Russell and Valtteri Bottas. What's happening with them? And we all expected, you know, an announcement post the summer shutdown at Spa, and the drivers actually, of course, you know, the way the media works, they had Valtteri and George in the you know, interview room together at the same time, and they basically, look, we don't have anything to announce at the moment. And then later in the week, Toto sort of announced that, yeah, we've made a decision, the drivers are aware of that decision, but we're not going to publicly announce it until all the drivers concerned in this discussion have secure plans for 2022. And that, to my mind, basically does push it very much down the route that it's going to be George Russell that they're going to pick. If they were sticking with Bottas, Russell would stay at Williams.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to worry about anybody with solid 2020.
And all you need
we're making a change.
Yeah, all you need to do with George Russell's contract there is getting a little bit of white out and a photocopier, and you've got the contract written there and then. It's not a huge, you know, change. So again, those, you know, everything there sort of is aligning towards it being George Russell who will be replacing Valtteri next year. And you would imagine, with a lot of the sort of sound bites that have been coming out of Alfa Romeo, that Valtteri will be going there to replace Kimi Räikkönen.
Right. The other hot story puts Alex Albon into Williams.
Supposedly Alex Albon in the Williams, and also Nick De Vries in the Sauber to replace Antonio Giovinazzi, who, again, you know, we talked about Giovinazzi a few times on the show. He's done good. You know, you can't, you know, the guy's been impressive, but, you know, he's part of the young driver scheme at Ferrari. But where's that opportunity? You know, where's that opening at Ferrari coming? They've got Sainz and Leclerc, who are arguably two pretty top tier drivers there, especially Leclerc. Sainz is, you know, a great driver in his own right. Maybe not quite that top tier drive, but is Giovinazzi any better? I doubt it. And then, of course, Ferrari have Mick Schumacher, you know, waiting in the wings there. Callum Ilott, who I think we'll probably talk about a little bit later, is also on that thing. I think Schwartzman's on that deal as well, who's, you know, been doing well in Formula 2 over the last couple of years. So I just don't think, I think Giovinazzi's been one of those guys like Jean-Eric Vergne or Sebastian Buemi or Jaime Alguersuari, who, you know, when they were in the Red Bull scheme, you couldn't ask any more from them. It's just they were in it at the wrong time. You know, maybe if they'd been in it 2 or 3 years later or 2 or 3 years earlier, you know, doors would have opened. So it's very unfortunate for guys like this, and they may fall through the cracks, not because they're not good enough, it's just because of circumstance. So I think, you know,
because there's only 20 seats in Formula One.
Exactly.
There's only 20 seats, and Formula One has more qualified guys in their development programs than there are seats for them, and some very, very good drivers are going to be on the sidelines or in an IndyCar or in a sports car.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not on the sidelines in many ways, because it's
true.
You know, they're still doing a damn good job there. I mean, you look at Albon; he's been doing DTM. I think he even had a win in DTM this last week or a couple of weeks ago. And you know, there have been talk about him potentially going to Williams, which is an interesting link. You know, would that sever his ties from Red Bull in the same way that Ocon lost his ties with Mercedes when he went to Alpine? You know, that's an interesting opportunity. And there's even talk of, you know, also potentially, you know, De Vries being available for Williams if they choose not to keep Latifi, because the talk coming out of Jos Caputo, the new chairman of Williams, is that they don't need in quotation marks, a paid driver now. They're in a financially stable situation that they can afford to pay a driver based on their ability rather than what money they bring to the team. So there's potential there, I think, for a few changes in that back end of the pack. I think Haas are probably going to start. I think they either have agreed or there's pretty certain they're going to stick with the guys that they've got going into next year with Mick and Mazepin. So yeah, it's going to fall into place, and I wouldn't be surprised if that it wasn't announced with Kimi announcing his retirement. There wasn't some announcements with Valtteri and George going into Zandvoort this weekend just to take a little bit of shine off Max. Could be a Mercedes ploy.
Could be, get the spotlight off the hometown boy. So now you mentioned Callum Ilott,
yes,
guy out of Great Britain, Ferrari development driver, and he will be making
runner-up in Formula 2 last year to Mick Schumacher, I think, wasn't he?
So he will be making his IndyCar debut at Portland. He'll be driving for Ricardo Juncos. Juncos, who has found a partner to revive his team. Luis, what's the other guy's name?
Oh, I gotta remember that. I know he apparently worked for Williams back then.
I don't know why that when I'm on the air his name escapes me because I had it earlier, but we'll get back to that. But Juncos has been, a smaller team in IndyCar. He's been trying to make a good go at it. Had a full season a couple of years ago with Kyle Kaiser and then a couple of other fill-in guys in there. He's kind of had to drop back to part-time in Indy 500 only. And he's kind of been just conveniently missing from the grid entirely this year, but he was able to announce that they're full season 2 cars next year, and they're going to run the last 3 races of this year. And Callum Ilott will be in that car. So it's see how he does. The team's bound to be rusty. I don't see him jumping in there and immediately impressing like Christian Lundgaard did in the Rahal car. But I think getting a guy of Callum's caliber in that car could only help the team. I think they'll have a respectable outing.
I'll be curious to see how he does at Portland, which it still looks like I'll be going to Portland for that one. But yeah, it's Brad Hollinger, the other one. So it's Juncos Hollinger Racing. That's the one. Under. But yeah, it tells you 2 things: that the writing of the wall is there, that his Formula 1 career may not happen, the way just how difficult the vacancies are there to begin with. To where I even talked about it a couple of weeks ago. We talked about it as well, that there's a good possibility we may not have a rookie on an F1 grid next year. This doesn't look like the only way that could happen is if it's Nick DeVries or a Callum Ilott or somebody or whoever ends up the F2 champion gets an opportunity, but it does not look like the case at the moment. So for Ilott to jump somewhere different, I think it opens the avenues that maybe if you were really good in F2, IndyCar is an option if there's no Formula 1 seats available. And I don't think we should view it as a bad thing either.
No, not at all. I think that guys like Ericsson and Grosjean coming over here and finding success has made IndyCar appealing to a lot of guys in Europe. And I read a quote that said, Grosjean is their best salesman, IndyCar's best salesman for, and of course, Grosjean was in the news. Also, he will be taking over the number 28 Andretti Autosport entry that has been piloted by Ryan Hunter-Reay for the last decade.
10 years, so that must be.
Yeah, that's how I think it was 2010 or 2011 when he first signed on with Andretti.
I believe so, because it was one of the years that he failed to qualify, and
they bought him AJ Foyt's car and put Bruno Junqueira on the sideline. Yeah, but
for good, yeah. Junqueira never made it back.
So we don't know the fate of Ryan Hunter-Reay. We don't know who's going to be driving that coin car that's going to be vacated by Grosjean, but we do know that Grosjean's going to be with Andretti now, which is I think that's a win-win for the team if you look at the way having Grosjean in there has kind of elevated the Coin team. And if you look at the way that the Andretti team seems to really need some help, I think that's going to be a pretty good match. What do you say, Richard?
Oh yeah, I think that no disrespect to the team that he's with at the moment, but I think it's Grosjean as I think probably in all fairness exceeded expectations that most people had, with him going there, especially after what happened to him post Bahrain last year. It could have sort of freaked him out a little bit, and he may have been off the pace, but no, far from it. The guy was on it. Straight away in IndyCar, and has been very, very impressive, and he deserves that opportunity at a bigger team, and I think he'll bring some skills and experiences, which I think we've discussed on the show in the past. Maybe Andretti are lacking a little bit, genuine winner. I know that, and when I say winner, I don't necessarily mean results winner, but attitude. Even guys who race Formula One for 10 years, like Grosjean did, and never won a race, they still have that winning and competitive mentality. And they put in exactly the same effort required to win. And I'm not saying that the IndyCar guys don't, but I think that their level of discipline and work, I may be wrong. I'm not trying to sound disparaging for anybody.
Well, I
may not be at the same level. I think Grosjean will bring that.
Yeah, I think Formula One is a whole lot more cutthroat, and you need to have a whole lot of real thick skin to kind of stay in.
I mean, if you look at, and again, this is no disrespect, but you look at Ryan Hunter-Reay. If that had been in a Formula One seat, he would have lost that seat 2 or 3 years ago, easily. You look at Marco Andretti, he would have been gone 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, I know he is now, but you know what I mean. You look at some of the other guys, they just sort of hang around because they're just, one of the boys hanging around sort of thing in IndyCar. And in Formula One, you don't get that opportunity. So
unless you're Kimmy.
Well, no, he's earned that opportunity.
I'm just kidding.
The boys earned that one. But
Kimmy is fast, yeah.
Yeah, there is something about it that I think Grosjean will be. I think he will bring, in a way, more to the team than the team will bring to him in terms of competitiveness. Right. I think he will bring that work ethic, and I think it'd be really good for guys like Colin Hurta, because, again, I don't want to question his attitude, but he threw away. I know it was a mechanical failure, but to my mind, again, he threw away a win at Gateway. He broke that drive shaft. By
let's not forget Nashville.
Yeah, there's again, and I hate coming across as being critical of the kid, because he's phenomenally talented, but talent doesn't win you championships, as we all know. Discipline and being, what's the saying? To win first you must, or to come first you must finish, or whatever. To finish first you must finish. There we go. That's the one. But and he's made a lot of mistakes, and for a guy that's been in this 2 or 3 years now, you've got to stop these mistakes. And maybe having something like Grosjean around who can say, okay, kid, this is the level that you've got to be at if you want to be successful. And, I sincerely hope that he can do that and work with the other guys in the team. Now, you imagine that Rossi will be staying on there. You don't know about Hinchcliffe. I don't know if that's been announced yet, but again, he's probably...
I'm pretty sure Hinchcliffe is going to be sent packing.
Now who fills that seat? I don't know.
Devin DeFrancesca, they're talking. Right now he's been tipped for that seat.
Which begs the question: where does Kyle Kirkwood go, or even Linus Lundqvist? Is he still in the championship hunt right now?
I believe, I don't know if he's in the championship hunt, but he's definitely one of the better guys in Indy Lights. But I believe Kyle Kirkwood has been spoken in conjunction with the 18 car, the coin car, that would be vacated by Ed Jones, and Ed Jones would be sent packing. That's the latest I've heard about Kyle Kirkwood.
So they gone now to discuss him. Have they brought up Jack Hawksworth into the mix? Because of course Hawksworth runs the Vassar Sullivan IMSA machine.
Now, I haven't heard Hawksworth's name mentioned in conjunction with an IndyCar ride for quite some time. But let's talk about Oliver Askew, who is getting another chance. Oliver Askew, who was with McLaren a year ago, and through a series of unfortunate events, including a bit of a head injury, he ended up losing that ride. He had a fill-in stint in that car earlier in the year when Felix Rosenqvist was injured, but Askew will run the number 45 Rahal car with Hy-Vee sponsorship in the last 3 races of the season, which blows a huge hole in my theory that Hy-Vee is not interested in sponsoring cars in West Coast races. But I guess that Hy-Vee is really.
Yeah, you did mention that.
I did say that,
and I said that watch Long Beach have 28 to 30 cars.
Yeah,
that's one step closer.
Yeah, so but I guess Hy-Vee is all in. They are bought in. They're sponsoring the doubleheader at Iowa next year. They're going to sponsor that 45 car full time, and we all know Bobby Rahal has wanted that third full time car for a number of years. He just hasn't had a partner the likes of Hy-Vee who are ready to bankroll the thing. So good for them. I hope Oliver Askew performs well here. I imagine that Santino Ferrucci is still in the conversation for that seat next year, as well as perhaps Christian Lundgaard. And there was another guy they tested as well. Rahal did. Then of course the hot rumor still has Jack Harvey taking over Sato's seat, and Sato perhaps returning to Andretti on a limited schedule, including the Indy 500. So, but again, some of that is speculation, but the Askew thing is real. The Kyle Kirkwood to coin is very, very strong. So we'll just have to see, and Hinchcliffe's probably going to end up in sports cars or unemployed. Yeah, sadly, after, trying to make the comeback, the guy just didn't perform, and I know that's some of it's team, but he's got to shoulder some of that himself. He certainly doesn't look like the Hinchcliffe of old, which is really not that many years ago.
No, it was like 4 or 5 years ago when he was winning poles, being competitive, winning races and all on the occasion. But I think we'll see what happens to Hinchcliffe when the inevitable gets announced. There's also the strong possibility that, from what I understood, that Meyershank could be announcing their 2022 lineup soon. Could be Portland, could be some other time, but we'll see. But we're getting close to possibly finding out the fate of Meyershank as far as who's going to be Elio's teammate and whether or not Simon Pagenaud will be back with Penske at all. Because all signs says he's not.
That's all the hot rumors have Simon Pagenaud partnering with Elio next year at Meyershank. And of course, the number 22 Penske car. Oh, that's a wild card right now because Penske could easily drop back to 3 cars. I think they operate better as a 3-car team than a 4. But then again, they could grab a guy like, I hate to say it, I've heard Rinus VeeKay mentioned in that Penske ride a time or two, not really strong because Penske kind of keeps their business close to the hip. But, certainly wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that you see somebody go there, even if it's like a Rossi. If Roger wants to buy him out of his contract there, we've heard that in the past that Roger's been interested in Rossi. So, but again, that one's a long shot.
Yeah, I think Renus is probably a long shot because I don't think there's going to be a way that Ed Carpenter doesn't let the same mistake happen to him when Newgarden and went to Penske happen anytime soon or again. Because I think Ed wants to have that driver that could carry the team for years to come, that be a contender to win races. So I think learning from with the whole thing with Newgarden, I don't think Ed is going to let that happen in that regard. But money talk. We'll talk eventually. But I was
going to say to hold a guy back from a Penske drive, which is the drive of a lifetime for an IndyCar driver. You know what I mean? That's to hold a guy back from that. I think even Ed would wish Renus well, even though it hurts his own team, because that is just like a dream come true for a lot of guys. That's just a sentimental fool in me thinking that Ed would be a nice guy about it.
If you put a big enough check in front of it, I'm sure he would be.
That'll be interesting to see for sure. And yeah, we'll see what happens at Portland next week. I know we'll discuss more about it. All I know is that Jimmy Johnson tested at Texas. I think that happened, and also a good possibility. I think there's been all but confirmed that in October, Johnson and Grosjean will partake at the test at Indianapolis, where they could take their orientation.
Yes, they are both gonna try to knock out the rookie orientation in Indianapolis here at the conclusion of the season. But again, Jimmy ran a number of laps out there at Texas. I really didn't hear what the speeds were, but he said, I think Jimmy's own quote is, "Man, those cars are crazy fast on ovals." I'm like, well, yeah. So, all right. Well, we are out of time. So, Richard, thank you. Luis, thank you. I want to thank the Hoobazoo Radio Network. I want to thank iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. I want to thank you folks that listen to us week in and week out. But until next week, good night.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hoobazoo.com.
Enter website, enter website, enter website, enter website.